Hello, hello, hello. As folks are joining us, just a big thank you to everybody for showing up for session 2 of Youth Advocacy Training for Ocean and Climate Action. If you missed session 1 last week, no worries. The recording for the session is up on the World Ocean Day YouTube channel. So again, if you missed session 1, please feel free to check out that recording. If you are not able to join us for any of the other 2 recordings for session 3 next weekend or session 4 the weekend after that, as well as this session, all of them will be recorded and all of them will be uploaded to the World Ocean Day YouTube channel. So don't worry about that if you're not able to join us. But for those of you who are here today, we are so excited to have you. We have a really awesome session set up for us today. For right now, let me make sure that the chat is enabled for everyone. All right, go ahead and introduce yourselves. We'll give it another minute or so here as we're letting people filter in. Let us know your name, your age, where you're visiting from, where you're joining us from. But then I'm also interested to see what your favorite species is that's endemic to your region. So species of either plant or animal or otherwise that is found specifically where you live. We'll give it just a minute and then we'll get started. Awesome. We have Zambia, the Maldives, the Philippines. We've got some species mentioned that I've never even heard of before. That's awesome. Cool. Well, as we are waiting for folks to join us, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. For those of you who have joined us before, welcome again. Just a quick overview of the session today. It's going to look pretty similar if you're familiar with the format of advocacy training. Just a quick introduction of our panelists, our awesome little discussion that we're going to have with some Q&A time at the end, and a couple minutes for announcements. So as usual, please feel free to use the chat and the Q&A feature throughout the session. If you do have any questions that you think of, we will hopefully be able to get to all of them during the Q&A session. And yeah, I think that we are still waiting for Ajay, who is supposed to be joining us as our second speaker, but that's okay. If we do have him, that will be awesome. If not, that's okay. But for those of you who do not recognize me, my name is Laura Johnson. I am the Youth Programs Manager for the Ocean Project, and I am super happy to be coordinating this program once again. I love advocacy training, and I'm super excited to be here with all of you. And then we also have my wonderful colleague, Ji-Yoon Lee, who is our Global Outreach Coordinator, and she's here as well, helping us to facilitate, and she might step in and add some to the discussion as well.
Laura, just to step in now that you mentioned, I think Ajay is here.
Yes,
So,
I do see him, so I will be introducing him. Yes. Hi, Ajay. Good to see you. Thanks for
Hello.
joining us. So actually perfect timing, because on that note, I am now going to introduce our wonderful guest speakers today, which we are so grateful to have with us. We have Carissa Cabrera, who is the CEO of FutureSwell, and she's an incredible content creator. If you guys don't already follow her on social, she's really, really inspiring and incredibly talented at what she does. And I'm very, very happy to have you here with us today. And then we also have Ajay Sawant, who is the president of the Think Ocean Society and a former member of the World Ocean Day Youth Advisory Council. So he also runs the social media for the Bow Seat programs. He's done a bunch of stuff with National Geographic and many, many other things, but I'm going to give you guys both a second to go ahead and introduce yourselves. So Carissa, I'll pass it off to you.
Hello, everyone. It's really awesome to see so many people from around the world in the chat. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me to the session. My name is Carissa Cabrera. I am working in ocean conservation and climate communications now, but I have a background working in marine protected species in Hawaii, specifically whales, sea turtles, and we have an endangered Hawaiian monk seal there. So I have a lot of experience working with education and outreach programs for nonprofits. And when I went and founded FutureSwell in 2020, it was really to offer meaningful communications and media to nonprofits and initiatives to advance advocacy goals. So all of these things I'm really passionate about, just like you. And I think that they're like an undeniable ingredient to advancing impact for our ocean. So I'm really happy to be here. I wear a lot of different hats. I work with a lot of different organizations, also closely with National Geographic. So that's awesome that we're both have that, Ajay. But I ultimately want to get you guys equipped and ready to share your story online so that we can create like a collective message for our ocean and climate action. And I hope that you ask a lot of questions today to both of us.
Yeah, thank you, Carissa. Really, really awesome to have you here. I'm very excited for the discussion. Ajay, go ahead and introduce
Yeah.
yourself.
Hello, everyone. It is so nice to be here, especially as the alumni of the World Ocean Day. I'm Ocean Climate Communicator and I'm based in Mumbai of India. I work as the communications manager at Bausit Ocean Awareness Programs, which is an organization which works around artivism and how artivism can be effectively used to advocate for ocean or any other resources that we are incredibly in love with. There's a saying that protect what you love, and for me, it has always been ocean. So I started my own organization called as Generation Artivism in 2022, and ever since then, we host workshops, seminars, and also various different kind of interactive activities across different parts of the world to make sure that young people across different places get a form of advocacy which suits the best for them, and they're able to advocate for the causes they care about. I am incredibly excited to be joining Carissa because I absolutely love her work. But yeah, I'm excited in general to like be talking about how communications work and how it can further help us advance conservation action, especially in terms of ocean.
Yeah, Ajay, it's great to see you again. Really excited for this session today. So just diving right in here, the whole purpose of using social media and using different communications is kind of already really well known amongst young people. We kind of grow up with access to the internet a lot of the time, and we have really early access to social media, especially in these younger generations. So we kind of already know like why it's important to utilize communications in getting a message across, but like to you individually as people who work in this space, what does it actually mean to be effective in communication? And then in terms of the purpose that that communication does play, how does that kind of change based on the actual message that you're trying to convey, whether it's like science communication or a call to action or along those lines? I'll pass it off to whoever wants to take it first.
I'll take it first. So I think from a marine biologist standpoint, I really reflected on the things that shaped me to want to, what effective communication pathways shaped me to take action. And when I look back, when I was growing up, like you guys, it was mostly really powerful documentaries like The Cove or really powerful social media videos like the sea turtle and the plastic straw being pulled out of its mouth. And then when I look, or out of its nose, and when I look back on that, those actually, the sea turtle video caused policy changes across the US. And there ended up being state level and county level plastic straw bans or public buy in. And so when I think about effective communication as a creator, ultimately, it's it depends on your audience and your outcome, and you want to be really clear what those are before you put a camera on your face. And so you want to be like honest, and for me, I really want to be like human. We're all people who are working on these ocean climate solutions, and in addition to sourcing your information from accurate sources, effective communication is really about meeting your audience where they're at. So if your audience is young, simplifying it. If your audience is older and understands the issue, it's about like diving deeper on the technicalities and the nuance. Yeah, I'll hand it over to Ajay.
Yeah, pretty much what Carissa said, but for me personally, it has been like a lot mixed about of like creating connections between people and the ocean, if I'm particularly talking about the ocean. It is also about using the data effectively that already exists, because there are people who do believe and understand through storytelling, but then we also have politicians and we have economists who believe in more of data-driven tech storytelling. Personal stories in particular, I believe, are like very effective because everyone has their own stories and many of us haven't explored them. The ocean has always been a backdrop to where I have lived and how I have been brought up. But one very important thing I realized is many people who go on the beach and who enjoy this resource are the same people who are devastating it, who are like littering it with plastic. So helping people connect to the ocean or any other resource that we want to effectively advocate for is very important. Maybe just asking them, how do you connect to the ocean? Sometimes even these basic questions do not pop in our head, and unless that happens, it's quite difficult to like actually relate to the real scenario that's happening out there. By presenting information in more accessible way is also one really important, I'd say, approach in raising awareness. Awareness comes through multiple ways. So effective communication also is more or less trial and error basis game. Everyone has their different approaches, and personally, for different audiences, exploring has always been like one of the best solution for me.
Yeah, definitely. And I appreciate both of many things of what you mentioned. First of all, Carissa, I just want to shout out Dr. Christine Figner. I don't remember how to pronounce her last name correctly, but she's actually the girl who filmed that video with this turtle with the straw up its nose, and her Instagram is at I believe the Sea Turtle Doctor or something like that. And she's awesome. We've worked with her before, and I just want to give her a little shout out. But yeah, I mean, that's a really excellent example of how social media can play a huge role in affecting change and kind of catalyzing people into change. But then Ajay, also what you mentioned about finding your audience and making sure that like the people that you're trying to communicate with are actually the ones who you're prioritizing getting your message across to. I think that actually brings us, we'll talk about that here in in this next section. So different types of messaging also not only work better for different types of audiences, but also on different platforms. So for both of you, how does a young person actually go about trying to identify their target audience? Depending on what the purpose is, obviously, like that might change. Again, like I said, if it's science communication or a call to action or promotion of an event or what have you. But how do you actually find that audience? And then once you find it, how can you tailor that message to your audience across these different platforms? Because it's, you know, like I said, not always going to work exactly the same across all platforms, even if your message and the general purpose is the same. So I'll pass it off to whoever.
Yeah, I can go first. Um, so one thing I've realized is in the entire ocean conservation and climate change theme, when we're talking about young people, it's much more easier to convince them and make them understand of the reality through storytelling. Storytelling can be very effective. But in terms of like older age groups, people become more logical and they relate more to the data, besides storytelling, of course. So having that sort of information out there, if it is social media platforms having more concise information, which is crisp and easy to understand with easy examples, are so much more effective. Uh, Particularly if we are talking about long form of communication, blogs are more read by adult audience. So like understanding that they are going to be referring and picking up from the testimonials, quotes from people, numbers is really important. Whereas on social media, it can be more fun stories like what Carissa does on her social media. And also understanding the reality is really important because In person, when you're talking to like a group of people, they're always going to be deniers, and that is when you really want to prioritize on how you want to communicate, or if you actually want to communicate some information. Sometimes, often more like than what you think, there are people who are never going to accept of your idea, and it's okay for them to not understand it. And it's better to like focus your energy on convincing and making those people understand who can actually perceive it. Because communication is not only about communicating some information, it's also about reception. And not everyone is as receptible as others. So just making sure of that.
Definitely want to emphasize everything that Ajay just said, and also the importance of being flexible and adapting your messaging. I think as young people, it's really important that you take opportunities to build skills in education and outreach. I had been doing that for 10 years before I started showing up on social media. And I think it's the same, it's just a different format of it. So go and do the outreach tabling and support webinars like this and sign up and say yes to those types of opportunities, because you'll deal with different audiences at different events and you'll be able to understand how to tailor your message. And then when you choose to use online communications for an issue, you'll be more equipped for different audiences. I also want to say that I really believe that your audience will find you based off of how you show up. So it's we can't reach everybody. There's a lot of data that shows that people are more likely to trust a messenger based on how they associate with that messenger. So can they see themselves in you? And frankly, that just means that my audience is mostly young women. And I think that I want to reach those deniers. I want to reach the older, more logical folks, but I instead have now like narrowed in messaging to what young, mostly women want to learn about marine biology. And so I would just start. I think your audience, be yourself. Most importantly, be yourself in your area of expertise. Your audience will find you, and just know that it's a two-way relationship, even though it's connecting us with screens, and they will tell you what they want you to share with them and listen to them.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you both touched on really important concepts within this, because I feel like this one particular set of questions could be its own webinar or webinar series, because finding your audience, there's so much to be said about all of this. But Ajay, I love that you touched on the different types of logic that you can go after, but I also appreciate the fact that you mentioned that sometimes you just don't even need to worry with certain members of your audience and reaching people like deniers, because there are things to be said about reserving your own energy and effort and time, and also mental health, into engaging with people who just do not want to hear what you have to say. And that, again, in and of itself, is its own kind of conversation. But then also, Carissa, to your point, being flexible and adapting and being able to move with who your audience becomes as you are making more and more content and you are still engaging further with the audience that you already have. Things on the internet change very, very fast. And I think it is very important to be able to adapt to that. And that means being able to figure out how to message to all of these different audiences as well. So actually, again, Ajay, I really do appreciate that you mentioned these persuasion techniques, because I have this on this slide here. So ethos is appealing to authority or credibility. So, this person, you should listen to because they are the president of this organization, or, they have an authoritative voice or role. So that just is inherently why you should listen to them. Pathos is appealing to emotions, which is something like the turtle with the straw in its nose. That's a very emotional thing. And we care about animals. We don't want them to hurt. We want them to be okay and safe. And then logos is appealing to logic or reason. Like, we should save the ocean because we like to breathe, and the ocean produces over half of the oxygen that we breathe. So like, that's probably kind of important. And then also, Carissa, to your point, storytelling, you mentioned that before. So, all of this kind of coming together, how do you actually go about, pursuing this? It's kind of all of these different pieces coming together to make your narrative into what you want it to be. And there is that authenticity and transparency component to it. So I think we can kind of combine these two questions, but they are separate as well. So what role does storytelling and compelling narratives play in advocating for conservation cause? So, how do you actually get people using these different persuasion techniques to listen to you? But then how do you actually be yourself, Carissa, like you said, and make sure that the people who are in your audience can relate to you in that way? So I'll pass it off to either one of you.
Yeah, thank you. So I think with the authenticity and the transparency, I just want everyone to give a little grace to themselves that it can kind of be difficult to show up online as a communicator, especially during those first few months. And it's a skill that is learned, and it's something that comes with time and practice and investment. Something that really, really helped me was going to the closest people to me, my best friends, my family, and saying, like, how would you describe me? Particularly my best friends that also work in ocean conservation, and saying, like, what role, like, what do you think I play? And truthfully, like, I've always been like more on the activist range of my messaging throughout my entire life. And so when I try to go logic in my messaging, it doesn't come off authentic because it's not how I show up in the ocean conservation movement. And so just being honest with yourself. I love that you have these 3 persuasion techniques up here, because it is true that these are the 3 approaches when you're making content that could result in consequences for the better. And then with compelling narratives and storytelling, I think those are the most important pieces of a piece of content. But when you look at short form, quick turnaround social media content, you might not be able to fit a full narrative into a short video. And so what is your overarching narrative? What is your overarching storytelling? At my company, FutureSwell, we will make compelling narratives for other organizations. So we just did this on seamounts for COP16 in Colombia. And that was based off of storytellers that were authoritative or credible deep sea scientists and that ended up helping advance to, like Ajay said, an older, more logical audience is how that video was used. But if I came on social media and started talking about seamounts, I wouldn't even be able to get into like the amazing data or the technical biodiversity jargon that's associated with seamount value. So it's really just like, how can I just make people feel excited that the deep sea has so much left for us to discover? There's these different layers of engagement for storytelling and narratives that I think we all as advocates and communicators have to factor in, and knowing that one piece of content can't hit all of those angles.
Very much voicing back what Carissa said, pretty much she covered everything that I had to speak. But storytelling transforms facts and figures into something very relatable to all of us. And it also makes it more memorable, I'd say. In one of the sessions which I attended with Dr. Hendrik Sala, he informed us how we can be a very compelling storyteller, especially to economists, in terms that when you establish a marine protected area and the outcomes are huge, you can, instead of saying that preserving this area is going to cost us so much, you just translate it in a way that reserving this area costs us only as much as it costs our country to buy ice cream every year, because that is the same amount of money that's required. Even if it might be like 30 billion, that is almost equivalent. So it makes you realize that even if it is just basic ice cream, and if you're just like, devoting that sort of amount of energy to protect a really big resource, which is going to economically as well as environmentally help our planet, is going to do great in the future. But besides that, I also strongly believe in own personal stories, in the form that for me, it has always been communicating how I have connected to the ocean and how things started changing for me. I joined Bauseed as an ocean climate communicator after almost 5 years of my work in collecting plastic on the beach and creating art out of it. And one random day, suddenly when I was creating art on the beach, a random person comes to me and says, "Do you know about this contest by Bauseed?" And that was my introduction to the whole ocean space. It is almost amazing because I never imagined something like this would happen. But at the same time, it introduced me to larger space, including World Ocean Day, National Geographic, the Ocean Foundation, and the journey just kept going. In what I mean to say in all of this is that find your own story and try to tell that to people, because everyone has their different journey, and helping them explore that story is going to be more effective than, directly communicating something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I feel like, again, this is its own thing. This could be its own, webinar. And I really appreciate what both of you mentioned about, how you show up and being honest with yourself. And, it can be very difficult, and it does take a certain amount of, having thick skin and being able to deal with what comes with being on the internet as well, being that open and transparent. But also just to mention what Ajay was mentioning about ice cream. That is actually in a session of advocacy training from, I think, close to 2 years ago, which is on our World Ocean Day YouTube channel as well. We were lucky enough to have National Geographic Explorer in residence, Enrique Sala, come and talk to us about marine protected areas. So another shout out there. I definitely recommend checking out that recording on the World Ocean Day YouTube channel. But like you said, like Enrique said, having these examples that really make it relatable for people is super, super helpful. So one of the things that I also heard, I think it was Carissa mentioned, was reaching more people than you might originally want to, which, there is something to be said about the intent behind wanting to go viral. But I don't necessarily think that going viral is always the ultimate goal. So when we're talking about specific strategy for promoting an event or campaign, that strategy is going to look very different from typical, storytelling or celebrating of, conservation wins or whatever the other types of communications you're putting out. So if it's a specific strategy, you don't necessarily need to be going viral, but you still want to reach people who are, potentially outside of that traditional audience that you have. You're going to be, if you have a community event, for example, if some of our viewers are, taking what they're learning from advocacy training, and you decide that you would like to go off and host your own World Ocean Day event, that would be awesome. But your community event, you want to reach people in your community. You don't necessarily want to reach people who are off on the other side of the planet. But how do you actually make that distinction? How can you, really center in and utilize multiple different platforms, not necessarily just digital media either, to make that happen? How do you plan to have this kind of promotional strategy? Pass it off to either.
I can go first. So as you mentioned, going viral shouldn't always be their thing, but it always helps if it's reaching the right people who we are targeting to. At Bowseat, we have our main aim, which is furthering ocean and human connection. So what we do is we usually post cute videos of marine animals, and this helps a lot because it does not just help us amplify the ocean human connection, but at the same time, it also helps us amplify our own program, which is our contest, our art, and everything else we post on social media. These posts can often like get really large number of like fun comments, and you actually get in the space which reaches the target audience, that is people who love the ocean, and these are the people who are actually going to share it in stories afterwards. So once you reach their page, Instagram and unlike many other social media platforms we use these days have algorithm that every single time you reach a person, Instagram understands that your content might be relevant to them. The more you reach, the more Instagram understands that this person is actually reaching the right people, and is going to keep on showing your content, even if it's something unique, to that person over and over again. So like trying to harness that sort of, I'd say, that sort of proportion of fun fluff content and also your program content is important. But besides that, also making sure that you are working on having the messaging very appropriate to platforms. Like Twitter might do best with like more solution-driven information that is full of numbers as well as technical stuff. On the same hand, LinkedIn might be more storytelling sort, and Instagram can be a really fun way of explaining how things work. Um, I, I won't say particularly that going viral is the best thing, because sometimes going viral can also come with negative effects, like possible going down the drain. Um, but if your messaging is clear and it is impactful, that always helps.
I just want to echo what Ajay said about fluff content. Like it can be very, very difficult to talk about a technical issue on social media and get like a wide reach. And I think that like understanding that, yeah, going viral necessarily isn't the goal. What you want to do is have your message get in front of the right people. I've been really diving into that in the last year because I think I'd rather have a few hundred people understand like the what's really going on with coral restoration or deep sea mining than talk about than just be clicking it because it's a negative, which negative messaging performs better for virality, which is sad. But ultimately, I think that what Ajay and the Bow Seat are doing really well is that does fit into their mission by posting the animals or like the natural ecosystem content that oftentimes does go viral because it does advance ocean human connection. And so creating this, I call it like a funnel of content where you're reaching most people with say like really general beautiful compelling images or videos, and then getting like preparing your audience to go deeper on an issue is really important. And then the people who make it to that lower level are likely a smaller group of people, but they're willing to understand it at the level you need them to say, take advocacy action associated with a campaign. Yeah, and we've been trying to crack this code at FutureSwell too for content. So we might try the beautiful clips that you guys do at the Bow Seat and see if it resolves our issues.
Yeah, I appreciate that from both of you. I think that the use of fluff content is kind of underrated in some ways, because you kind of, no matter how we feel about algorithms on social media, you still kind of do have to play to them. And sometimes, algorithms are always evolving, kind of always ever changing. And the fluff content doesn't necessarily have to be stuff that doesn't matter. It can be those beautiful clips. It can be those really easily accessible things for people. And then, Carissa, like you said, the people who are ready to take that next step forward, who are, available to learn more, you kind of also have to just trust your audience and trust that those people will engage with the content that you make that isn't necessarily fluff and that does have that more specific messaging and calls to action and what have you. So there's a lot of things to think about in terms of social strategy and stuff. And when it comes to the more technical side of things, a lot of what we've been talking about so far is more like the theory of communications and talking about it in terms of like how it works on like a social level, like interpersonal level. But when it comes to the actual tools that you're using, like the specific platforms and resources that you have. I'm sure both of you have your own kind of process for creating the content, for editing, for creating captions, for posting schedules and keeping track of when you're going to be putting out content. So do either of you have any good tools that have helped you? Do you feel that, there are certain features on like Instagram stories or stuff that are underutilized, overutilized, like overrated, underrated? And then are there any other individuals or organizations on social media that you kind of look to for inspiration who do a really good job of all of the things that we've been talking about today?
Yeah, so when you're diving into video editing for the first time, I would just suggest using CapCut. It's free and it'll really allow you to use templates or to understand what editing is available to you. As far as resources, I think that if you're in this session, you know that World Ocean Day and Earth Echo and the BAUSI and all of these organizations have a lot of education online that you can use to convert into social media posts. I really suggest getting proficient in Canva if you haven't already, because they are one of the they make design, editing, and now so many other things accessible globally, and their interface is very easy to learn and use, and you can get a team up, and yeah, free for nonprofits. And then things that are underused, I think that like replying to comments on TikTok or even on Instagram, I think people hesitate to do it because maybe it doesn't make the video look as good, but it's a direct answer to your audience who is watching your content, and you want to make sure that it's reciprocal in your communication. And then for accounts, groups, and organizations, I'm just going to put a bunch in the chat. I'll answers.
Yeah, I think Laura and Carissa has pretty much covered everything. In fact, I'll be using CapCut going forward. Um, One particular thing I felt was really useful in terms of Bauseed's programming was comments. This is a very weird algorithm thing, but if your video is going viral, like many of Bauseed's video have like 23 million views, but 40 million views. But again, it's important to know how it translates into real action. A very easy thing to do is when you realize your video is going viral, a way to add call to action to that video is just commenting in that particular video and pinning the comment. We have noticed almost 2,000 link clicks after one of the videos went viral, and it was almost organic paid promotion, that sort of thing. So making harnessing comments can be really effective, be it your own video or someone else's video which is going viral, especially if, let's say, Carissa's post about conserving high seas goes viral, and I'm also running a petition which is about high seas. Commenting that and maybe even asking Carissa to pin it can really help amplify your work. So that is one of the underdogs of social media, is what I found.
Definitely. And I think that commenting is such a regular thing for friends to do with each other's accounts, but you don't really think about it in terms of like posting on behalf of an organization. So I really appreciate that. I think that's a really helpful tip because I feel like I have not even thought about that. And would you say that the same thing goes for like people who engage with stories on Instagram or other platforms? Would you say that that is also kind of a similar concept?
I'd say more people see your story if you comment. It's weird, but the first thing I do when I post something is I have 3 accounts because I, of course, have more social media accounts than anyone else has. What I'll usually do is I'll go on the post which I have published and immediately start commenting and sharing with few people. Make the people within your organization, the people who are supporting your social media strategy, make them like your post within the first 10 minutes, make them comment on it. Once Instagram understands that people are actually liking this post, it's definitely going to push to more followers. Because especially with Instagram being more and more restrictive, not even letting your own followers see your content, doing this can like heavily increase your reach, at least in terms of reaching your own audience, which you do not want to miss out.
I also wanted to add, for an underused tool, there is now broadcast channels on Instagram. And what I did is I created a broadcast channel. I call it like high impact ocean climate actions, but it's really where if I'm talking about an issue on my profile or there's something going on, I will then be like, hey, we're sending like letters to the minister here. I know I said it in a caption, but like if you guys want to take action to protect the South African penguin, you can send a letter right now. Here's the link. And it's like it's the funnel of the most engaged people, and it's a small group of people, but they are doing it. They are willing, they trust me enough that they want to take the extra action. Right now, it can be really difficult to get people to click out to a link in bio, let alone the action that's on it. And so making it as easy as possible, I think the broadcast channel, that's how I've chosen to use the broadcast channel. Whereas I think I've seen it used mostly like in a social setting or like a chat setting. And I know that mine's just, if they're getting a message from me in there, they know that it's going to be an ask for a campaign.
Also, a quick tip, always connect your Instagram to your Facebook. Weirdly enough, it seems like a lot of views come from Facebook, and that is going to push your Instagram post even further. Our first Bouncy Reel, when it went viral with like 3 million views, it was almost shocking, but we realized that 2 million of those views had come from Facebook. And after Instagram understood that they're getting views from Facebook, they started promoting it also on Instagram. So, like, connecting platforms can really be a key to all of this. Just telling something because not many people think of this, but Facebook is incredibly powerful tool even now when we think no one uses it.
That is a very good point. I think that way more people are still on Facebook than we give them credit for. So that's definitely very, very good tip, Ajay. I appreciate it. And I think that both of you with the going back to commenting and you know, Carissa, especially with the broadcast channels, having that really almost like an intimate relationship with members of your audience who are particularly engaged. It makes them feel welcome in this community that you're creating, and will hopefully encourage them to share your calls to action and your content outside of things. So I would say from my end, I don't run the World Ocean Day social media, but our June and mine's coworker Kate does. And I've been able to help her a little bit with it every now and then. And one of the things that I like to do when I go on there is to like everybody who shares a certain post, their story. When it like says at the top of your notifications, you know, X amount of people have mentioned you in their story, and it's because they're sharing your post. If you can go in and just like the stories that people share of your content, it's kind of like saying thank you and you know, reinforcing a positive relationship with them. I think that's also kind of an easy thing to do that like makes members of your audience who are engaging actively like feel really good about it too. So I'll just add my 2 cents there. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes left. If anybody has any questions about social media and communications for our lovely panelists, I do actually have a question just to start things off. It was touched on a little bit, but when young people are pursuing these kinds of, I guess, campaigns and initiatives on social media, there can be instances where they're engaging with people who are either on the opposite side of the political aisle or just have completely, totally different beliefs about the climate crisis and all of the things, or even they believe in it and they're on your side, but they think that the way that you're advocating for it is wrong or should be different or what have you. So for young people who are just sort of dipping their toes into the space of communicating on social, what are some things I think that you think are important to keep in mind as you're kind of navigating this space for the first time?
I also had a similar question as you, Laura, just right on that line. So I might just dip in a little bit more on that front. I feel like at least around me, there's a lot of people who have OCD, want to be perfect, like they're scared of being wrong or criticized. Like even for me, when I was leading a social media for our organization, every single word, everything, like I would be super conscious and stressed about, you know, possibly being wrong or getting criticism. So how can you also deal with this negativity that's inevitable on social media, especially as a young person?
I can go for it. Social media can be daunting, definitely, and it does take a while, especially provided that there are so many algorithms taking place, and Instagram not showing many people the same post that you want them to see. Also, as Laura mentioned, there are the climate deniers, but let's just keep them aside for now because, they mostly do not follow you because they don't care and they do not believe in you. But to answer Gion's question, I realized that when you make these human mistakes, do you know that more people are possibly going to engage with your post because they will find the mistake interesting? Um, it was actually one of the reports by Hootsuite which said a post which had even a spelling error it does not mean you should necessarily have it in every single post, but it's going to intrigue people if it's in once a while and if it's by a big organization thinking, oh, this person did spelled it wrong. And they're going to see it for like longer time, thus engaging more people because Instagram then thinks that something interesting is happening in this post. But again, understanding that there are people behind social media, so you don't have to really worry about it. Even if there's like a distress call, being transparent really helps on social media. So everything is figure outable, honestly. So making sure that you should be able to convey what you want to, and everything is figure outable. Literally every single damage that you do on social media can be figured out. Is the only thing you need to know because every one of us goes through that phase. It can be figured out. Just be transparent and just be true to yourself.
I also want to say that I do think that the negative feedback or comments are inevitable. And I think as creators, it's easy to fixate on those instead of the positive feedback that you get. And I think it's a case by case basis. Like I know people who delete the comments, I know people who block the person, I know people who ignore them wholeheartedly. But my philosophy is like if they're like engaging in dialogue that isn't completely shutting it down and you think that there's a way to talk about them or talk to them about the issue and find a middle ground, I do put some energy to that. But that's an individual basis. I think it's far more important to spend your time and energy investing in the people who are already interested in what you're saying and do want to learn more and providing pathways for them to learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that definitely connects to, we have an anonymous question in the Q&A feature here. This person can't help but overthink the criticism coming their way, so I want to keep anonymous or keep my personal information private. How can I achieve this? So I think that is kind of getting at how can you still advocate for these things without having your kind of personal brand out there?
Yeah, so that's a great consideration. And I think that, like I said earlier, we need storytellers and content coming from all angles. I have a friend who runs like it's more like climate justice and environmental solutions, less ocean page, but it's all memes. She reaches hundreds of thousands of people and she's entirely anonymous. So there's that. There's also pages that focus primarily on nature clips, like me and Ajay showed perform really well, and you can funnel them in from there. There's many ways to make content without having a face to the name. I think that I would just start because we need as much as possible.
I do not have anything to add because Chris has basically said everything. But I do have one important resource to share with all of you, which is this Instagram post by Impact, which talks about how you can actually communicate in reality, if not on social media, about climate change and how to reserve your energy for the people who can actually use the real information. Uh, it should be in your Dropbox. This is repost that Bowsit has done from Impact's page. But it's really interesting because it talks about how to talk to your family members who don't believe in climate change this Thanksgiving.
Okay, I'm gonna copy and paste. Just make sure that you're sending those messages to everyone and not just the hosts and panelists, guys.
Okay.
It's all good. Yeah, thanks, Ajay, for sharing that. I'm definitely gonna look at that. Impact at Impact on Instagram. They are one of my personal favorites, so I really appreciate that as well. Now there's another couple of questions in here. I want to make sure we get to all of them. We still have about 10 minutes. So somebody who knows Carissa, who was able to meet them at an internship, asked this question. Luke said, how do you balance that fluff content to facts and stats ratio? While I am new in climate storytelling, I've been struggling with the issue of watering down the really important but technical issues that still need to be shared. I think that's an amazing question.
Hi, Luke. Happy to see you here. I don't do enough fluff content, and as a result, my reach and engagement is lower. So that's like the honest answer, is that I clearly err on the side of what you're saying, where I just want to hit people hard so they have all of the information around one issue, and it results in people opting out of engaging with the content. And so I think we need to take a lesson learned from the bow seat and incorporate a little more of that. But my solution to that would be, for every fluff piece you have, have a middle dive piece, and then what I call deep dive pieces, where you can talk about all of the issues, and it creates that funnel.
Yeah, if you particularly want to look for ratio, I'd say at Bowsit we post once a week any fluff stuff, and then other 4 days we will usually post about our program. It works great. But on the basis of how much content you're able to create, try to reserve those days where you want to take break from creating and creating and creating and post fluff content, because that is more or less just repost. It also gives you the break in, the overload that you have to go through for creating everyday content. At the same time, is going to get more people to see your Instagram posts. When you're saying fluff content, always try to like repost stuff which is already worked on Instagram, because that has like highest chances of working also on your page. It is one thing that I've never understood why it happens that way. But if a thing has not worked for someone else and you're reposting that, there are huge chances that it might not get the extra audience that you want through the fluff content. So try to repost successful stuff, and you can also post the things that you like, but fluff content, which is especially for deriving more audience to your page, should be the one which is already successful.
Mm, I really appreciate that. And I think that the use of the term fluff content can kind of also downplay the importance of that content, because even if it's like, quote unquote, just a beautiful clip of the ocean, like that still goes back to the ethos, pathos, logos kind of concept, because having these like a cute animal video or like a beautiful ocean scene, like that's still a way to get people to be like, oh, look at how beautiful this is. Like I care about this. So, fluff content, it's like not the stuff that's a call to action, but it still is very important. So don't think that just because you are posting something that could be considered fluff, that you're still like just watering down your strategy. There's a couple of other questions here that also kind of talk more about just how to get people to care and how to get people to act. And we actually have Kenya, who's a member of the current World Ocean Day Youth Advisory Council, who asked a question. How do you guys recommend we strategically use social media such as Instagram to go from numbers on a screen to actual numbers showing up at something like a World Ocean Day event? How do you actually translate that online engagement to in-person action?
So great question. And my personal philosophy around it is it's really difficult to, because social media is the global audience, and you don't know what percentage of that audience is even within walking, biking, or driving distance of your event. And so when you're promoting an event, or when I'm promoting an event, I really do focus on like local outreach, which maybe you have a social media graphic, maybe you have a flyer, maybe you ask some local community leaders to post that for you. But when I'm working at like large scale beach cleanups in Hawaii, we're still putting flyers on businesses. And I think like actually deprioritizing it as an outreach strategy might result in higher numbers, because you could focus on some of the more organic in-person factors that might translate more.
totally agree with what Carissa said. That is probably the best way. If you want to use social media, though, I would say um, trying to focus more on ads if you want in-person people, because that lets you target people on basis of location. But as Carissa mentioned, in on-ground work, as an on-ground outreach works so much more better when you want people in reality. Because social media, you cannot usually, translate on how many people will come to there.
Very much so. And I think one thing I want to add to this is something that I learned from actually Susie Hicks, the climate chick, who put me in touch with Carissa for this session. And Susie did a session with us during our last advocacy program for social media and communications as well. And what I learned from them is it usually takes seeing something 7 individual times to actually take action on that. So keep talking about it, keep posting about the same thing. It might feel really, really repetitive after a certain point, but for something like an event specifically, if you just post about it the one time, it's going to be even more difficult to get people to want to show up in person. Even something like a webinar that's not in person, like posting about it as consistently as you can within the set time frame ahead of time can be really, really helpful, because that translation of numbers, seeing it once, seeing it twice, you have to see it 7 times to actually internalize that information and take action on it. Let me see here. We do have some more questions that are a little bit more broad. So if you have not watched the first session, I think that a lot of these questions are answered in our conversation last weekend with Armand Alex. But one question I see here that I do think is very important to answer from Mulweli, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. How can one ensure that the urgency of climate data is felt without causing information fatigue or desensitization? I think that is an incredibly difficult question, but incredibly, incredibly important.
That's what keeps me up at night, Mueli. So ultimately, I think that we're at this state with the ocean climate crisis where mass devastation is happening and we're watching it. And so how do you balance that by also preserving people's hope? And I'm actually in a reevaluation phase right now and re-strategizing for 2025 of how to focus content more on resilience efforts, and because I think that the data is out there and it's clear, and there's a lot of content creators and storytellers talking about the state of the ocean and the severity of it. And I think that's still a key knowledge piece to be able to make the case that we need solutions, but weighing out my ratio of content with more, not like with more case studies of solutions and resilience efforts that work to minimize harm on ecosystems and people and coastal communities, because that's what I think the next 5, 10, our lifetimes will need to look to, and we'll need to show people how that's done because we are creating it. So I worry about the desensitization as well. I think we've seen it with other social issues a lot, and it's difficult to balance it. And I think that not using, I don't know the answer transparently.
This is actually a very interesting question, and I think I do know a few things that can really help. We see on World Ocean Day's page as well that we often keep posting good news, which keeps like people, it sort of like tells us that there are good things happening and there are people who are working and there are people who are making a difference. So there's good stuff happening as well. It's just that the negative part of it is too much, but there's also some hope, and there is a part which is working to stop that negative part. We always hear good things overpower negative, like bad stuff, but in reality, it might not necessarily be like very evident in the climate and ocean space, but just transmitting that information out there if someone is just at the phase where they're totally desensitized of the fact that they might never, or sensitized of the fact that they might never be able to protect our planet, that small news can actually give them a lot of hope. At Bowseat, we also have this range of climate heroes who are actually working on ground, as well as even those who are at their home who are disabled or who do not have accessibility, working on great levels. Posting about them makes people feel like if a person who has no access to internet connection and has no access to resources can do this, I can also do something that can help me protect the planet. And provided this person is making such a huge impact, then if you're living in a world where you have so many resources, you definitely can do that. There's also humor, like mooding memes, which we see going around right now, which are also being harnessed as, something that talks about climate change that can help us engage more people with climate change conversations. And there's also art. Art can be a really nice stress reliever, as well as at the same time, it can help us focus towards important aspects, positive as well as negative. 2 years back at Bowseat, we had this contest which said, express your creativeness about climate change through humor. And we had so many incredible artists just showing that penguins are packing up their bags and they are going somewhere else. Or bears shaving off their fur because it's getting too hot. So expressing yourself in different methods can actually help ease that, stress that people have. After all, as Carissa mentioned, it's not the easiest part in communications, but as we move forward, we have to find solutions to these problems which exist. And the good news, which World Ocean Day post, is definitely one of those. So keep posting hope when you're also posting about negative things happening to our planet, and keep giving people tangible solutions that can help them feel like they are a part of the entire movement.
Yeah, Ajay, I think that's a really wonderful way to kind of wrap this whole conversation up and tie a bow on it. I think that's a really beautiful sentiment, and sharing the actions that people all around the world are taking to make the world a better place in their communities, in their countries, and all around the world, on in like literally every corner of the world. There's so much going on. And there's one more question in here. We don't have time to get to everyone. We're already a few minutes over, and I do want to get to our announcements, but somebody asked, how people who are, maybe disconnected from the broader networks, and how folks in the global South who don't necessarily have access to the same resources that people in the global North have access to, how can they stay connected as well? And it's all about community. We talked a lot about that in session 1 last weekend as well. It's all about leaning on the people around you, and finding the network of networks, asking people in your community who they know, how they can help reach out to other people with you, how you can collaborate with everyone around you. And that is kind of how you create that hope. Hope is a feeling, but it's also an action. And I think that this session has really showed that. So thank you again to Carissa and to Ajay. Just quickly, a reminder that our schedule is same time next weekend for event planning and fundraising, talking specifically about how to put together an event. We've talked a lot about social media and promotional strategy today, but how do you actually plan an event on the ground, either in person or digitally, virtually, and then how do you actually go about raising funds to make those things happen? And then the weekend after that, session 4, campaign organizing, kind of bringing all of the first 3 concepts of the program together into one. How do you go from start to finish with a call to action, reaching an audience, putting out stuff to help people take action in their communities? And we really hope that you're able to join us. And again, all of the sessions are recorded and will be uploaded to the World Ocean Day YouTube channel. So thank you again so much to Carissa and Ajay. Please feel free to let me know if you have any questions at ljohnson@theoceanproject.org. We will be sending out a survey at the end of the program, so please keep an eye out for that. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day, evening, afternoon, morning, wherever in the world you may be. And we hope to see you next week. Thank you again. for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Have a great rest of your weekend, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.